I never meant to hear it. Lying there with my eyes closed, pretending to be unconscious after the crash, I thought I was protecting myself. Instead, I heard the truth that would change everything. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys that touch the heart. Your support means everything to us. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance as James knelt beside me on the rain-soaked asphalt. He didn't know I could hear him. No one did. The crash had happened so suddenly, a delivery truck skidding on wet roads, my car spinning out of control. When I came to, I heard panicked voices around me, and in that moment of vulnerability, I made a split-second decision to keep my eyes closed. Victoria Chen, CEO of Horizon Innovations, who prided herself on never showing weakness, chose to hide in false unconsciousness. "Please be okay, Victoria," James whispered, his voice breaking. "Your company needs you. Your employees need you." He paused, and I felt his hand gently take mine. "Lily needs you too. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about how you helped her with her science project. You're the only female role model she has since her mother left." My heart clenched. James Parker had been my executive assistant for 3 years. Efficient, dedicated, and private, I knew he was raising his daughter alone, but I'd never allowed myself to see beyond his professional role. I kept everyone at arm's length. It was safer that way. "I know you think you have to be invincible," he continued, his voice barely audible above the rain. "You think showing any vulnerability will make the board see you as weak. But you're wrong, Victoria. Your strength isn't in never falling, it's in how you rise. And we all see it, even if you don't let us say it." The paramedics arrived, and I maintained my charade as they loaded me into the ambulance. James insisted on accompanying me, telling them he was family when they questioned him. Family. The word echoed in my mind as I lay there, monitors beeping around me. I hadn't had family in years. My parents died when I was in college, and I'd poured myself into building my career instead of relationships. At 38, I had a corner office in a skyscraper, but my apartment felt hollow. I'd convinced myself it was a worthy trade. At the hospital, they ran tests while I continued my pretense. The doctor told James the first appeared to have no serious injuries but remained unconscious for unknown reasons. They would keep me overnight for observation. When the room finally emptied, I opened my eyes to the dim hospital room, the monitors casting a blue glow across the walls. James had fallen asleep in the chair beside my bed, his phone still in his hand. I noticed a text conversation open on the screen. It was with someone named Lily. "Dad, is Ms. Chen going to be okay?" the message read. "The doctors say she'll be fine, sweetheart. Try to get some sleep. Love you. Tell her I'm making her a get-well card. Love you too." Something broke inside me. This child, whom I'd met exactly twice at company functions, was making me a card. And her father, my assistant whom I paid to manage my schedule and bring me coffee, was sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair because he cared. I must have made a sound because James stirred, his eyes flying open. When he saw me awake, relief washed over his face. "Victoria. Thank God. How long have you been awake? I should call the nurse." "Don't," I said, my voice hoarse. "I've been awake longer than you think." Confusion crossed his face. "What do you mean?" The words stuck in my throat. I, who gave speeches to boardrooms full of skeptical investors without breaking a sweat, couldn't form a simple sentence. Finally, I whispered, "I heard you. After the crash." I was awake the whole time. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by embarrassment. "You were conscious? Why would you pretend?" "Because I was afraid," I admitted, the truth surprising even me. When I realized what had happened, I panicked. Showing vulnerability isn't something I know how to do. James sat back in his chair, processing this information. So you heard everything I said? I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Well, he said after a moment, I meant every word. The next morning, the doctor discharged me with instructions to rest for at least a week. I immediately began protesting, listing the meetings and deadlines awaiting me, but James interrupted. I've already rescheduled everything critical and delegated what I could, he said firmly. The company won't collapse if you take a few days to recover. I wanted to argue but found myself too exhausted. James drove me home to my penthouse apartment, and as the elevator doors opened directly into my living space, I suddenly saw it through his eyes, immaculate, expensively furnished, and completely impersonal. No photos, no mementos, nothing that couldn't be found in a high-end furniture catalog. Nice place, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. It came with a decorator, I replied, suddenly self-conscious. I never bothered to change anything. He helped me settle on the couch and went to make tea in my unused kitchen. I heard cabinets opening and closing. Do you actually live here? He called. There's nothing in your refrigerator except champagne and yogurt. I usually eat at the office or order in, I called back, embarrassed. He returned with 2 mugs of tea and sat across from me. For the first time, I really looked at him. James Parker was about my age, with kind brown eyes and premature silver threading through his dark hair. He always dressed well but not flashily, today in a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and gray slacks. I realized I knew almost nothing about him beyond the basics in his personnel file. How old is Lily? I asked suddenly. He seemed surprised by the question. She's 10. Turning 11 next month. And her mother? His expression tightened slightly. Left when Lily was 4. Decided parenthood wasn't for her after all. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. We're better off. He took a sip of his tea. Lily's amazing. Smart, funny, kind. She wants to be a scientist or an astronaut or both. Changes weekly. She sounds wonderful, I said, trying to imagine this child I barely knew. You said she's making me a card? His smile was warm. She was very concerned when I told her about your accident. You made quite an impression when you helped her with that volcano project at the company picnic. I remembered that day. I'd only stopped by the children's activity table because the board chairman was watching. I'd ended up getting drawn into helping a serious little girl with glasses who was frustrated that her volcano wasn't working properly. We'd fixed it together, and when it erupted perfectly, her smile had been unexpectedly rewarding. I barely did anything, I murmured. You took her seriously, James said. That means everything to a kid. The conversation lulled, and I felt the weight of all I'd been avoiding. James, about what you said after the accident. His phone rang, interrupting me. He checked the screen. It's the school. I need to take this. He stepped away, and I heard him speaking in low tones. When he returned, his expression was apologetic. Lily's running a fever. I need to pick her up. Of course, I said quickly. Go. I'll be fine. He hesitated. You shouldn't be alone after a concussion. The doctor said someone should check on you regularly. I can call a service. Why don't you come with me, he suggested, then immediately backtracked. Sorry, that's inappropriate. You're my boss, and you need rest, not a sick child to deal with. I surprised myself by saying, actually, I'd like that. If it's not an imposition. The shock on his face was almost comical. You would? Unless you'd rather I didn't. No, it's fine. It's just, unexpected. 20 minutes later, I found myself in James's modest sedan, heading toward his daughter's school. The contrast to my usual town car was stark, but there was something comforting about the lived-in quality of his vehicle, a small collection of rocks on the dashboard, Lily's treasures, he explained, a half-empty package of mints, a sweater tossed in the back seat. We picked up Lily, who was pale and quiet in the nurse's office. When she saw me, her eyes widened behind her purple glasses. "Miss Chen? Dad said you were in an accident." I said gently. "But I'm okay now." "I hear you're not feeling well either." She nodded solemnly. "My throat hurts and I'm hot and cold at the same time." "That sounds unpleasant. Maybe we can recover together?" She considered this seriously before nodding. "Okay. But I didn't finish your card yet." "I'll look forward to it when it's done," I told her, and was rewarded with a small smile. James's apartment was in a modest building across town from my penthouse. Where my home was all sleek surfaces and emptiness, his was thoroughly lived in. Bookshelves overflowed with a mix of adult and children's titles. A science fair poster leaned against one wall. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking, and family photos covered nearly every surface. "It's not much," James said apologetically as he helped Lily to the couch. "It's lovely," I said, meaning it. "It feels like a home." He gave me a curious look before turning his attention to his daughter, taking her temperature and giving her medicine. I stood awkwardly, unsure of my place in this domestic scene, until he gestured to an armchair. "Make yourself comfortable. I'm going to make some soup. Lily, do you want to show Ms. Chen your science books while I cook?" Lily nodded eagerly despite her fever, and soon I found myself paging through illustrated books about space, dinosaurs, and marine biology. Despite feeling ill, she brightened as she explained her favorite facts. I listened, genuinely fascinated by her enthusiasm. "Dad says you run a whole company," she said suddenly. "Do you like it?" The question caught me off guard. Did I like it? I'd been so focused on succeeding, on proving myself, that I'd never stopped to consider if I enjoyed the work. "Parts of it," I answered honestly. "I like solving problems and helping create new things. I don't always like the meetings." She nodded sagely. "Dad says meetings make his brain melt." I laughed, surprised. "Does he now?" "Oops," she said, not looking particularly sorry. "That was probably a secret." "Your secret is safe with me," I assured her. James called us for soup, and we ate at their small kitchen table. The domesticity of it all was foreign to me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd shared a home-cooked meal with anyone. As Lily's eyelids grew heavy, James excused himself to put her to bed. When he returned, he found me looking at the photos on his bookshelf, Lily as a toddler, Lily on her first day of school, James and Lily at what appeared to be a pumpkin patch. "She's my whole world," he said quietly, coming to stand beside me. "You've done an amazing job with her," I said. "Especially doing it alone." "It hasn't been easy," he admitted. "Balancing everything. That's why I was so grateful when you approved my flexible schedule when I started. Not many CEOs would do that." I remembered the request in his initial interview: core hours in the office but flexibility to handle school pickups and drop-offs. I'd agreed because his qualifications were impeccable, not out of any particular compassion. "It was a practical decision," I said. "You were the most qualified candidate. Still, you'd be surprised how many companies talk about work-life balance but don't actually support it." He paused. "Can I ask you something personal?" I tensed but nodded. "Why did you pretend to be unconscious after the crash?" The question hung between us. I could have deflected, changed the subject, or given a superficial answer. Instead, I found myself speaking the truth. When I came to and heard voices around me, I panicked. In that moment, I felt completely vulnerable, and I don't know how to be vulnerable. Not in front of others. Especially not in front of my employees. "Even when you're injured in a car accident?" he asked gently. "Especially then," I said. "Do you know what they called me in business school? The Ice Queen." It started as an insult, but I embraced it. Being cold, being untouchable, it protected me. In an industry dominated by men, showing any emotion was seen as weakness. But you're not in business school anymore, he pointed out. You're the CEO. You make the rules now. I shook my head. The board is still mostly men. The investors, the partners, they're all watching for any sign that I can't handle the pressure. Is that really true? He asked. Or is that what you've convinced yourself? The question stung because it hit too close to home. Before I could answer, a small voice called from the hallway. Dad? I don't feel good. James excused himself, and I heard him comforting Lily. I took the moment alone to look around his living room again, at the evidence of a life well lived despite its challenges. There was joy here, and connection, the very things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. When James returned, he looked apologetic. She's running a higher fever. I need to stay with her. Of course, I said, standing. I should call a car. You shouldn't be alone with a concussion, he reminded me. You're welcome to stay in our guest room. It's really just an office with a futon, but I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he said firmly. And frankly, as your assistant, I'd be neglecting my duty if I let you go home alone after a head injury. The formality of his tone, reminding me of our professional relationship, somehow made it easier to accept. All right. Thank you. The guest room was indeed small, with a desk covered in papers and a futon against one wall, but it was clean and comfortable. James provided me with a t-shirt to sleep in and a new toothbrush. As I settled in for the night, I heard him moving around, checking on Lily, the quiet domestic sounds both foreign and comforting. I slept fitfully, waking several times to the disorienting feeling of being in an unfamiliar place. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and ventured to the kitchen for water. I found James at the table, a laptop open in front of him. Can't sleep? He asked, looking up. Unfamiliar bed, I said. What's your excuse? Lily's fever broke, but I'm catching up on work. He gestured to the screen. I'm rescheduling your meetings for the rest of the week. You don't have to do that, I protested. I can go back tomorrow. Doctor's orders, he reminded me. 1 week of rest. I sighed and sat across from him. I don't know how to rest. I've never taken a vacation. Never? He asked, incredulous. Not since college, I admitted. There was always more work to do, more to prove. He closed his laptop. To whom? What? Who are you trying to prove yourself to? The question caught me off guard. The board. The industry. Competitors. Is that all? I looked away. My father, maybe. He always said I'd never make it in business because I was too soft. Too soft, James repeated. That's not a description many would use for you now. No, I agreed. I made sure of that. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. You know, when I first started working for you, I was terrified. Your reputation preceded you. The Ice Queen, I said wryly. Exactly. But then I noticed something. You were tough, yes, but also fair. You promoted people based on merit, not politics. You implemented that parental leave policy that helped so many employees. You funded the STEM program for girls in local schools. Those were just good business decisions, I said automatically. Were they? Or were they evidence of the person you try to hide? He leaned forward. Victoria, the board respects you. The employees respect you. No one would think less of you for being human. You don't understand, I said, feeling defensive. You haven't been in my position. No, he agreed. But I've watched you in it for 3 years. And I've seen how lonely it's made you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Lonely. Such a simple word for the emptiness I'd been carrying for years. I'm not lonely, I said automatically. I'm focused. James gave me a sad smile. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be focused and still have connections. I stared at my hands, unable to meet his gaze. I don't know how anymore. Yes, you do, he said gently. I saw you with Lily today. You were present, engaged, genuinely interested in what she had to say. That's all connection really is, being present with another person. A lump formed in my throat. It's easier with her. She doesn't have expectations. Neither do I, he said quietly. I looked up then, meeting his eyes. There was something there I hadn't allowed myself to see before, not just respect or professional courtesy, but genuine care. It terrified me. I should try to sleep, I said, standing abruptly. He nodded, not pushing further. Good night, Victoria. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Lily recovered quickly and returned to school, while I reluctantly followed doctor's orders to rest. James worked remotely, handling my most pressing matters while keeping me updated. In the evenings, the three of us would eat dinner together, play board games, or watch movies. It was a glimpse into a life I'd never considered possible for myself. On the fourth day, I received a call from Marcus Winters, the chairman of the board. My stomach tightened as I answered. Victoria, he said, his tone unreadable. How are you feeling? Much better, I assured him. I'll be back in the office next week. Good, good. Listen, I've been talking with the executive team about the Anderson merger. My pulse quickened. The Anderson merger was my project, months of careful negotiation and planning. Is there a problem? Not exactly. We've been reviewing the terms, and some of us have concerns about the timeline. I think we should discuss delaying the announcement. Before my accident, I would have immediately pushed back, defended my strategy, perhaps even implied that questioning me showed a lack of vision. Instead, I found myself asking, what specific concerns do you have? The conversation that followed was surprisingly productive. Marcus raised valid points I hadn't fully considered, and I found myself actually listening rather than just waiting for my turn to speak. By the end, we'd agreed on a modified approach that addressed his concerns while preserving the core of my strategy. I have to say, Victoria, Marcus said before hanging up, this is one of the most constructive conversations we've had. Maybe you should get in car accidents more often. He chuckled at his own joke. After the call, I sat in stunned silence. For years, I'd approached board interactions as battles to be won. But this felt like a genuine collaboration, and it had been easier, not harder. When James returned from picking up Lily, I told him about the call. So you're saying I was right? He teased, a smile playing at his lips. Don't push your luck, Parker, I replied, but I was smiling too. That evening, Lily proudly presented me with the get well card she'd been working on. It featured a surprisingly detailed drawing of a woman in a business suit standing atop a mountain, with the words, "Get well soon so you can keep conquering the world," written in colorful letters. Dad helped with the spelling, she admitted. Do you like it? It's the best card I've ever